Yeah.
I'm just looking through Twitter and on Facebook and YouTube, looking at some questions, and I thought, why don't I ask you some of the questions that people are asking? Just says, how did you find out that Mark suffered from depression? It's a good question. Because I think that can be a hard thing, can't it, for a couple, just like alcoholism. It creeps up on you, the dawning that somebody's not just drinking a bit too much or not just sad. There's something a bit more than, because we're all sad, we're all down sometimes, and there's a big difference, isn't there? It's an interesting question because I don't know.
Well, I don't think there's ever a eureka moment, is there?
When did you know it wasn't just the normal sadness and stresses and strains of life? When it's something more chemical and...
Well, I think when normal things that should normally cheer you up sounds so facile, but things that should have a more positive impact. The fact that you can't escape the downward spiral, I suppose. The fact that you know, no matter what happens in your life or what's happening around you, you don't feel joy, or it's a fight to feel joy. Or, I mean, I think depression. I think when you talk about depression, there's a real danger to just get obsessed with the word depression, and I think depression is so many things. It can manifest itself as jealousy, anger, loneliness, isolating. Like codependency is a massive part of depression, and just seeing briefly the Fern Cotton thing about suffering from depression and the way in which she sort of doesn't assign all of it, but some of it to a relationship. You know, relationships and how you function in a relationship. I think that's probably where we began to realize I was depressed, was because so many parts of our relationship were beginning to not function properly. Where, you know, I'd be forever doubting whether I was attractive, if things changed in affection between us, where I would forever you know, think that I looked awful, or do you know what I mean? So, and then there was a sort of neediness, and then I couldn't just, if you asked me how I felt, I'd have to say how you know, it was kind of almost...
It's interesting, that thing about what you said about just then about you didn't look right enough. And we touched briefly on this before, that I really believe that you have I think the spectrum is wide, is broad on body dysmorphia, and I think you have it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I was talking to Maddie the other day, that's our 14-year-old, and I was saying to her, what do you think this is? So many teenagers have this vocabulary that we just didn't have, you know, suffers from depression, self-harming, all this stuff. And I said, where do you think a lot of it comes from, the depression? And she said so much of it comes, she thinks, from looks. And I said, do you think that's social media? And she said, well, no, all adults like to say it's about social media, but it's not, because I know that it's airbrushed, and I know that it's that, I know that it's that. So many teenagers, we dismiss what they might call their depressions. Oh, you're just being a teenager. And how do we not know that's where depression started? Like, do you think your depression started in your teens?
Yeah.
Or even before, maybe? Do you think you were born that way?
No, because I've said before, I know I was born happy because I like trying to seek out having a laugh. I like making people laugh.
Yeah.
I like the feeling of happiness when it hits you. I like the feeling of...
happiness, don't you?
I like the feeling of safeness and... Yeah, I mean, that, in a weird way, the frustration of knowing happiness is how I know so categorically I'm not happy most of the time, because I'm not in it, I'm not with it. You have to sit comfortably in it, you have to let go, you have to be free, you have to feel easy, you have to, all these things which I struggled to be. I struggled with all of those things. I struggled to relax, I struggled to not beat myself up, I struggled not to look at everything in terms of how one hasn't achieved this, that and the other. So happiness, but I have had times when I look back at my childhood, I have very happy memories, albeit a very kind of tempestuous childhood and very insecure childhood and a very lonely childhood. There were times of great creativity and fun. And then as a teenager, I do think that you're right, I think we do dismiss a lot of what teenagers go through by the tag, oh, you're being a teenager. And I think it's almost a defining feature of being a teenager is that depression is a massive thing in there because your hormones are all over the place, your sense of belonging is all over the place. I mean, I went through the problem of wanting to be, not wanting to be part of any group, to then when I went to university, wanting to be part of every group.
That need to belong.
Yeah.
It's getting the line between when's your teenager just sad and hormonal, and when does it cross over? Because just by the nature of teenagers, don't they? They isolate away, and I don't know if you guys, but they don't want to talk to you. They go from sharing everything to being cagey. It's really hard.
I think we're unnecessarily.
I mean, we're very attuned to it because of you, so we're always kind of almost looking for it, aren't we?
I think we're unnecessarily harsh on a lot of teenagers. I personally think there's infinitely more pressures on teenagers today than there were in my day.
Can I just ask another question from one of my tweeters, Lucy Lou? Dacia Queen. She tweets a lot and she watches the films a lot, and you always share back, Stacey, and she says, do you have any distractions that you use to help with any anxiety you might have? I find that really hard.
I find it really hard.
Do you know what? I sometimes I went to CBT for a while, and I will go back, to plug in. I'm a real hypochondriac. I worry that I've always got whatever the thing is that day in the Daily Mail. I convinced myself I haven't. And my CBT counsellor recommended you wear a elastic band quite tight on your hand, because she said by the very nature of the brain, you can't tell the brain not to think something because it will just obsess. And then actually she said to me, I'm going to tell you now not to think of pink elephants. What are you thinking of? Pink elephants. And basically what you have to do, snap the rubber band as hard as you can, and it literally makes your brain go do-do, and then try and distract and think of something else to do. And that does work for me. Works with our little one as well.
I tried that, but I just got
Didn't work for you,
I
did it?
needed so many elastic bands. My arm was covered.
You're having to
and
ping
I got so stressed about whether I was pinging them at the right time.
What do you do then? Do you distract?
The only thing I do that's of any direct impact on my mood is exercise. It's the only thing I do. I mean, for me, my exercise is as religiously important as my work. So, sometimes I'll beat myself up and sort of think, oh, you shouldn't be spending an hour doing that in the morning before you start work. But actually, if I don't do that, then I'm not going to be able to be as efficient or as focused. Or it's medicine, and also it's about looking after yourself. I mean, there's a lovely adage. I mean, we're talking about depression, but in terms of addiction and what have you, there's a great thing about keeping what they call your recovery unit intact, which is like you can't change people around you. You can't impact on how people are going to think of you and all that kind of stuff. And when you're in a good place or a healthy place, all you can do is make sure that your little recovery station is sorted, and that includes, that includes when you're an addict, things like washing, hygiene, finances, family, food, sorting, knowing what you're doing when you're doing it, and I think that's another key as a coping mechanism with depression is slowing things down a bit and taking things a step at a time. I mean, me and you are terrible. We rush at everything, and I can sometimes just get really anxious from the energy of you. And that's no fault of yours, that's your energy. And I can be like that myself, but when it's someone else and it's not at my energy, I can get hooked into someone else driving a
I suppose it's similar when with your energy, when your energy is very down or very slow or and I don't want to get hooked into that because it brings me down. I suppose it's got to be a similar thing the other way for you with mine.
But equally, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are times when I can be hyper up.
Really?
And it drives everyone really nuts.
Really, Mark?
But I think again, going back to the Fern Cotton thing, it really resonated for me, this idea of relationships. I think a lot of my depression, before I'd kind of gone into therapy and stuff like that and done rehab, what have you, I would have said that so much of how I felt about myself came from the relationships that had been a success or not, and how I'd been in those relationships. And I do think there is this word, codependency, which is quite an American word and all that kind of stuff, but I went to a codependency meeting once. It's like an AA meeting for codependents. And I have to say, I've never been more distressed by how powerful that condition is.
I think codependency is a massive cause of anxiety, isn't it? Because, and also, I mean, before you went into Priory, we didn't even know what that meant. It's a condition that lots of people don't even know that they've got. You know, that you can be, that your anxiety can be, you can be almost hiding it from yourself through this need to always be with another person or to do everything through the eyes. You know, like you, I don't know if you, somebody would ask you how you felt and you'd tell them how I felt.
Yeah, I mean, that's literally at its most extreme. If you think of what it is to be a teenager, it's all about relationships, non-relationships, with parents, not with parents, with friends, not with friends, with that group, not with group, first girlfriends, first boy. It's all about rejection and acceptance, rejection and acceptance. And it doesn't surprise me that teenagers aren't forever, you know, grappling with what depression is. And I think it's the lucky ones, if you like, that come out the other side and aren't using certain things like alcohol or drugs or sex or whatever to cope. It's very easy to get caught in that.
I feel so sorry for kids in this. Our culture here is so driven by alcohol, isn't it? I mean, I mean, we will all say, all parents say, well, you know, you're going to be a heavy drinker, you're going to go to university and you're going to drink too much. It's just preordained almost.
I think when you first hit alcohol and drugs and drink and all that kind of stuff, you don't know what you're fixing yet.
No.
You've got no consciousness of what you're fixing.
No.
You don't think you're fixing anything.
Have we even yet?
Well, no, but you think you're just having fun.
Yeah.
Why do I look red?
I don't know. Maybe it's because you're depression.
Why have I got... If I carried on drinking, I'd have ended up with one of those
been
noses.
purple.
I'd have had one of the... I walked past a man the other day.
You'd have had purple
I
broccoli
walked
nose.
past a man the other day.
Hey guys, don't get so far that you've got a purple broccoli nose.
I walked past a man the other day. You were there. He was so red, I thought his head was going to explode. In Covent Garden. Corpuscles coming out of his nostrils. One of those noses that you've invested money in. I mean, serious man.
Did you like it because it made you think?
Maybe think,
glad
oh, I don't have that. No, but I'm looking at myself now. I feel like I've got a red Alky's nose.
Let's do body dysmorphia properly next time. We keep saying we will.
Well, you were a depressive teen. Talk about yourself.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I felt very dark. I remember after my first boyfriend and I split up, I lived in a dark room for about 2 years.
That's pretty dark.
Yeah, I had very dark times, but I was probably just told, oh, you're just a teenager. But I think it were periods of depression. Everyone can have periods of depression. I think there's different kinds, isn't there? There's something that happens and you go to a dark place, maybe what like Fern Cotton was talking about, and that's a period of depression, like you say, a period of alcoholism, of alcohol dependency, and then there's the difference of somebody that really has that chemical thing going on that's going to go through their life, that they're going to need medication for all their life. So I've not had that, but I've certainly had times where I felt really, really dark and wondered about the meaning of it all and what the hell the point of it all is, for sure. I think we both need sugar.
That's the other thing.
Don't ever give up sugar!